Hello, you're watching Insight with me, Fifi Peters. Today's focus is on the construction sector. Investors have long lost hope in the sector turning the corner. The boom times ahead of the 2010 World Cup are long gone. Today, big companies are bleeding profits, blaming the economy. Small companies are closing shop and shedding thousands of jobs. But is it all doom and gloom for South Africa's construction sector? And are some companies masking bad management by blaming the economy? Let's find out. In the industrial area called Wynberg lie the headquarters of WBHO. Founded in the 1970s, it's one of the youngest construction companies on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. It is also one of the only construction companies that are still growing and making profit. This is the man at the helm. His name is Mike Wiley, and he's been with the business for 43 years, almost the same time as WBHO has existed.
Yeah, when I was at school, I didn't know what to do, and I was quite good at maths, and my dad said I should try engineering, so I did civil engineering at UCT, and then I had a bursary, and when I was able to pay that bursary off, I joined Wilson Homes in those days. That was 1975. And I also did a BCom part-time, which I found really has been of great use to me. And so I joined Wilson Homes, that then became Wilson Bailey Homes, and then Wilson Bailey Homes Ofcon, and now everybody just knows it as WBHO. And it's been now 43 years. And I'm just really in the twilight of my career. I'm chairman. I'm sort of halfway between executive and non-executive. And I will be retiring pretty soon.
On the other side of town, in Pretoria, South Africa's capital, lie the headquarters of Robex, another profit-making construction company. Like WBHO, Robex is also run by a man who started at the bottom and climbed his way to the top. His name is Rudolf Fourie.
I started as working for a company called Petrocol as a technical representative for about 30 odd years ago. And then one of my clients was Robex Construction, which we sold bitumen to. And the owner approached me, Koos Robenhammer, and he asked me to join Robex. That was 22 years ago. I joined Robex, and we started a company called Roadmax Surfacing. And today that's one of the leading road surfacing companies in the country and bitumen providers. And we started that and then 10 years ago, Robex listed on the main board of the JSE, 11 years ago actually. And I became CEO 8 years ago, when our founder, Koos Robenhammer, retired at that stage, and he became the chairman of the board.
In a developing economy like South Africa, the construction sector should be at the forefront of growing the economy and creating jobs. But this isn't the case.
In my whole career of over 30 years in the construction sector, this is probably the most toughest environment I've seen it. It's quite a difficult environment. A lot of the big-name construction companies is busy falling by the wayside for various reasons. And it's tough out there.
Never before have we seen anything like this, where the market capitalization today is half of what it was in 2000. So, the industry, it's a very sad state of affairs, because, in a growing economy, the biggest employer is usually the construction industry. And today and last year, jobs are being lost all the time, hundreds of thousands of jobs.
The industry is blaming the economy for its troubles. Last year, South Africa was downgraded to junk status as growth slowed to almost nothing.
Let's look at what's happening to the construction industry in South Africa now. The reason for that is that everyone is scaling down, including government, on major infrastructure projects because of budget constraints and a low-growing economy. Once we use those constraints, we lose them. To build them up is going to be difficult. And you need this expertise and capacity to invest in infrastructure delivery?
I think many of the companies at the moment have been very surprised with the further deterioration in Q4 and Q1 on infrastructure spending. So if we look at our trends broadly, last year the trend in the overall index for construction was down about 10%. Right? If we look at Q1 17 to Q1 18, it was astounding to us to see that Q1 18 activity levels dropped another 10%. Right? And we don't know exactly what the reason is, but it looks like government spending by SOEs, by provinces and by municipalities has taken another step down.
There is a lack of work in the industry. This is leading to the companies undercutting themselves and cutting their own throats, so they are all working at losses. The second part that we attributed to is specifically talking about payments. Now, payments on either government or on the private sector, and these payments specifically is what is required for the construction industry, both on the main contractors as well as the subcontractors, in order for their businesses to stay afloat.
When you say payments, you say they're coming in late?
We are definitely saying it's coming in late. We are saying when we are speaking about government payments that they are not adhering to their own requirements of 30-day payments, which has been highlighted by our President in his State of the Nation address as well earlier in the year.
I mean, on average, how long are they taking to pay?
If we're talking government-wise, or public sector-wise, we're talking about easily between 60 to 90 days. Some of our contractors have been owed more than 180 days.
When these companies like Eskom and SAA and Transnet have got so much debt, it's difficult for them to carry on with their infrastructure programs. And that's what's hurting.
SANRAL is our biggest single concern today. SANRAL previously has been one of the best run state departments as always. They ran quite a tight ship, and we were very dependable on SANRAL on their work. They had quite a consistent budget, so they brought quite a consistent amount of work out. Currently, for the last year, they have not brought out very few jobs, which affected us quite dramatically, the fact that SANRAL is not spending any money.
In the last 10 years, the market value of the sector listed on the JSE has halved as companies have closed shop. The bricks that built Avenge into South Africa's biggest construction company 10 years ago have broken down. Today, Avenge and Group 5 are a fraction of their former glory. Marian Roberts has exited the construction business entirely to focus on mining, oil and gas, while Basil Reid is broke and in business rescue. It's the classic David and Goliath story, and the newest kids on the block now run the show. The downturn of the economy over the past decade has seen many companies search for growth elsewhere. Australia was a popular destination for construction companies, as was the rest of Africa.
In 2000, myself and Eric Meyerowitz, one of our directors, went across to Australia because we just thought that we really should maybe have a hard currency. You know, the political uncertainty was still around. And we bought 40% of a company called ProBuild. And that company, and we took all our systems through there because even though we were still small, we never had debt. We were always very well respected by the banks. We could get guarantees. So we had a good thing going. Even though we were small, we were very conservative. And we took those same systems across to Australia, put them into ProBuild. And today, ProBuild is one of the biggest builders in Australia.
At this stage, we're looking at ways and means of surviving this time. We're looking at alternative income from, in our case, in Australia, and a small bit. And then definitely from Africa, we're looking at work in Kenya, Uganda, Namibia, Botswana, and those companies to try and survive the period which we are in at the moment.
But things weren't always bleak for South Africa's construction sector. There was a time when there was more work than the industry could handle.
It was a great industry, it really was. There was so much of the infrastructure of South Africa, of what we maybe take for granted today, was getting built in those days. If you think of all the freeways around Johannesburg, around Cape Town, and you think of all the airports, the power stations, they were building, we were building, not us, but we were involved building power stations. It's probably about 15 power stations on the East Rand at amazingly low prices, producing electricity for really low prices, until in 1990 there was actually a surplus of electricity. So all the big industrial plants like Secunda, that was being built during those days. I remember Basil Reed were a big player in that, and LTA and Grenica, and then the big plants, such as the aluminium smelters, etc., etc. So, there was huge infrastructure being built. And I must say, as a young civil engineer and with a small company, I was watching these big boys and sort of thinking, maybe we could do that one day.
If we go back to mid-2000s, right, I often mention to people all cylinders in the engine were pumping for the construction sector, right? So if we look at the drivers of earnings of construction companies, in the middle of the 2000s we had a very strong commodity cycle, which was driven by the substantial growth and accelerating growth, in fact, in China. That was one, and that was then beneficial for the resources companies investing and expanding their operations in Southern Africa. We also had government at that point in time with relatively low debt to GDP levels. Right, so we came out of a situation from 1994 till about mid-2000. The government had been prudent, right, and reduced the overall debt level. So therefore there was substantial capital available for spending on large infrastructure projects. And then lastly, we had, of course, the Soccer World Cup, the preparation for the Soccer World Cup.
While the rest of the world was reeling from the global financial crisis, South Africa's construction sector rode it out. This was also the time when many companies colluded, making extra profits by fixing prices, an offence they paid heavy fines for.
At the time of the crisis, as I say, we started the stadiums. I remember we put the bids in the end of 2006, and we were well on the way in 2007 because we had to be finished by late 2009. Which gave us basically 2 years to build those stadiums, and you need much longer than 2 years to build a stadium. But I think all the contractors came to the party and worked amazing hours and things and got it done. So the financial crisis then came in 2008, and I think South Africa was fairly well shielded because of our good banking systems, etc. We weren't tied up in all these housing loans and things that caused the problem. And so it was, we were reasonably softened from that full effect, but it gradually, the overall economy then gradually started deteriorating. But things did, if you just look at the margins, and we carried on pretty well until 2012, 2013. If you go back, we were all still, lots of work, still doing well. And just in the last really 5 years, things have really started tightening.
But not everyone is convinced that the economy alone is to blame for the sector bleeding profits and jobs. Stay tuned. Insight continues after this short break.